Alrighty, so I'm gonna run down through some of the basics. Some of you people may already know this, some of you people may not. That's totally alright. First things first, as a protection warrior, you're gonna want to be in your defensive stance. Not only does it reduce damage, but it also gives you rage over time, which rage is your essential core mechanic to be able to cast any of your abilities. I use the word cast loosely, because obviously we don't cast, we're melee. So some of the core abilities here are, I'll run down through them in order. Charge, Revenge, Shield Slam, Devastate, and Thunderclap. Now this isn't prioritized order, this is just a simple, quick get it out there in the open, and I'm going to explain it here. First ability on that list was Charge. Charge is the ability that you use in order to get into battle, get some rage, to be able to do what you need to do, and get where you need to get quickly. One of the key things about Charge is your first tier talent set. I believe it's the first. It gives you choices as to how you want to use Charge, how you want to affect the way that Charge is used, essentially. One of them is a stunning mechanism, and I use that a lot, actually. I think it's Warbringer, and we'll get into talents here in a little bit, but so like I said, yeah, Charge is just run in there, get people, pull up the aggro, whatever, and then you have, next on the list, is Revenge. Revenge is an ability that hits two people. It is constantly generating rage for you, which again is needed for your abilities. So you're going to want to use Revenge as soon as it's up, as soon as possible. It has a 9-second cooldown, as noted in the tooltip. It resets every single time you dodge or parry. Now, we don't stack dodge or parry anymore because those are essentially ineffective stats. But there is still a chance that the enemy will miss you, which counts as a dodge, or you block, which also counts as a parry. So this ability is constantly proccing, and it is constantly important to just basically spam the heck out of the button and make sure that your rotation somewhere in there has this button being hit at basically all times, because it's cuckoo nuts how fast it comes up. The next ability on that list was Shield Slam. This ability, if glyphed, is phenomenal. Not that it's not a phenomenal ability already. It's a huge aggro getter. It's almost guaranteed that if you lose aggro and you Shield Slam, you're going to gain aggro back. No questions asked. One of the great things about it is it generates a decent amount of rage. Therefore, you can use what's called damage mitigation, and you can essentially absorb other people's attacks. So whenever this is up, even though it has a 6-second cooldown, 5.5, it's important that you are constantly hitting this ability as well. Now there's some variations with that ability, sometimes that you'll want to save it, and when you don't. And that's the glyph version, and I'll get into glyphs here in a little bit. The next ability on the list is Devastate. Devastate, it doesn't actually tell you in the tooltip, but Devastate does what's called Rend, or what used to be Rend. It puts a damage over time on the target, causing them to bleed, and it also resets your Shield Slam. So if nothing else is going on and your focus, you have time to focus on hitting Devastate, I would suggest using Devastate as much as possible. So like I said, I mean, it reprocs your Shield Slam while your Revenge is going on, and it's just basically mashing these 3 buttons. Revenge, Shield Slam, and Devastate, just constantly. And by doing that, you're bound to not lose aggro. One of the other key abilities that also applies red is what's called Thunderclap, and that's right here for me. Thunderclap reduces movement speed of the enemy, but not only does it do that, but it also hits everyone around you, and again reapplies that damage over time, rend, to all of the targets that it hits, therefore keeping aggro on you no matter who's hitting what. Now it does have again a 5.5 second cooldown, and it's one of those abilities that whenever it's off cooldown, you kind of hit it, just part of your rotation, do a little bit of extra damage. Essentially though, you don't have to use this ability as much as the other 3 that I just discussed. You can save it, and then if a enemy comes running up or whatever, and you're just a little bit out of range, you can hit Thunderclap, pick them up, and continue doing what you were normally doing. There is obviously a taunt ability, which for warriors is it's mediocre. It's mediocre really for what I would say any tank. I mean, you need it, and it should be on your bars, obviously, but if you're running in with charge and you're doing what you need to do with your abilities in Thunderclap, then taunt is only there as a backup. It's there for if something does happen, it's out of your control, it's out of your range, all your abilities are on cooldown, whatever, you can't quite move over or get out of the spot that you're in. Taunt, pick up the ad, or enemy, and then carry forward with your rotation on that enemy, so that way you can build aggro, and then essentially just work them into the big mob that you're going to be pulling around. Protection warriors have 2 damage mitigation abilities. Technically 3, but they have the first one, which is Shield Barrier, which is for magical damage. It's not... I would say it's for magical damage. You can use it for any sort of damage, but the other damage mitigation ability is better for that, for physical. So anyway, if you need to absorb little amounts of damage and just kind of help your healer out, this is your go-to ability. It takes 20 rage, and the more rage that you spend on it gives you a better outcome, gives you a better absorption. What this will do is increase your health bar, essentially, and if used in certain mechanics, you could actually extend your health to a point that because it gives you the barrier, you could extend your health to a point that you could dodge some of the, or absorb some of the older Cataclysm mechanics. Now, I'm not sure if they're going to bring some of that back in this expansion or not, but there used to be a boss that would drop your health down to a certain point, and if your health was at that point, you instantly died. This would prevent you from going below that, because you would have that extra cushion to absorb the damage instead of falling all the way down into that percentile of health. Anyway, the next damage mitigation is Chill Block, which only prevents melee damage, does not do spell damage. However, most people are going to be beating on you with their sticks or their swords, and it's a good idea to be blocking their attacks. There's not a whole heck of a lot here to be said about this ability. Just use it whenever you have 60 rage and you should be good. What else? Oh, some of my macros that I have set up. You can see the little wording on some of these abilities here. I use charge. That's macroed with battle shout. Now, with the two shouts, you have one that increases your health, which is commanding shot, almost like a priest would. And then you have battle shout, which increases your attack power. Typically, I would suggest increasing your max health, but if you're comfortable with your tanking abilities, you can do extra damage by increasing your attack power with battle shout. The next macro I have is for thunderclap, which has demoralizing shout. Demoralizing shout is a 1-minute cooldown that, as soon as it's procced, reduces damage by 20% from the people around you for 8 seconds. So the reason I have this macro to thunderclap is because once you get everybody in range and you're doing damage, you can pop thunderclap, not have to think about hitting demoralizing shout, and everybody is affected by demoralizing shout, which means they do less damage to you. And because they're in the area to thunderclap, it's a good combo all around. The next ability that I have is Shield Slam with Berserker Rage. Shield Slam with Berserker Rage gives you extra, basically, if it puts you into a rage, you do more damage, but it also gives you extra rage in the long run, granting you more of the spamming of your thunderclap or other abilities. And then, let's see, lastly we have Shield Wall. This is a 2-minute cooldown, and this is 2 minutes is quite a long time. But warrior. Shield Wall will actually prevent quite a bit of damage from going through. So if you have a boss that's totally beating face, then this is the ability that you want to use whenever you can to prevent that. It's also great to use in a lot of areas where you can't prevent some of the damage. So you pop this like on a trash mob and you're getting hit too many times too fast. This can alleviate some of the overall health that you get chunked, and can also help out your healers quite a bit. Alright, so what else do we got on my list here? Talents. I chose Warbringer as my first talent because it stuns people, so when you run in and you stun people, you have time to be able to strafe or move around and collect other mobs, other minions, and by doing so, you can pull everybody together in that short amount of time that you stun, which is tremendously useful. You can pull people together, get them grouped up, thunderclap, you know, that sort of thing, keep them together. Warbringer also interrupts spells that other people are casting. Not the hard casts, but the soft casts. There is a difference. Soft cast spells are interruptible, and Warbringer's great. You can back out of range, get out of range just enough, and have another interrupt to essentially charge into an enemy and interrupt their spellcasting. The next one is Enrage Regeneration, which you'll see on the corner down here. It's a cooldown that all these cooldowns in this tier basically give you health back. I find that this is probably the most useful. It has a 1 minute cooldown, so you can use it on trash mobs and still be able to use it within a boss fight. Overall, it gives you quite a bit of health back. So as a tank, it's hard to regenerate your own health, and I think this is probably the best ability to do so. The next one is essentially a DPS sort of tank spec or tier talent, sorry, that either one of these is kind of blah. I was just going with heavy repercussions only because your shield block, this ability down here, once that's up, your shield slam will do more damage. And you're constantly going to want your shield slam to be hitting people. The other two I've tried. I don't personally like them. Go over them real quick. Sudden death allows you to execute people when you do your auto attacks. Because you're spamming revenge, shield slam, and devastate so much, you really don't have any auto attacks to be going through. So execute hardly ever comes up, and it's a 10% chance, so it's very low. The next one is whenever you devastate, it stacks 6 times, and then essentially your heroic strike is free. Heroic strike is not something that you normally use in your rotation anyway. I mean, it's off the global cooldown, so you could be constantly putting this into your rotation and doing good with it, but having to monitor those 6 stacks, since it doesn't refresh, it's difficult to say, okay, I've hit devastate 6 times, okay, now I need to hit heroic strike before everything runs out. It's more encumbersome, I guess, with the feel and the playstyle of a warrior, but I don't necessarily say that you shouldn't take this ability. If you're good at following your buffs, then this is a great ability for you. The next here is there's 2 notable, and then the third one is semi-notable. The 2 notable for me are Stormbolt, which deals damage to an enemy and stuns them. One enemy, a single target. Now, this can be useful if you're fighting a lot of spellcasters. Otherwise, it's just not worth passing up Shockwave, which stuns everyone for the same amount of time. And then lastly, you have, which is the one that I said not so notable, Dragon Roar, which is, yeah, it's a mediocre ability. As a DPS, it's probably more valuable, but as a tank, it's one of those that I would much rather have the stun to stop spellcasters than to just knock them back and have them continue doing what they were going to do anyway. The next tier bracket, these 2 spells here, these 2 abilities they pale in comparison to Vigilance. Vigilance allows you to place a damage reduction buff on a player, and then it makes your taunt free. So if you've lost all aggro, the healer's getting damaged tremendously or something, pop this on somebody, preferably the healer. It'll save their life, and you have an unlimited number of taunts for the next 12 seconds. And it's off. It just ticks. Constantly keeps ticking. As fast as you can push it, it's ticking. So you can continuously keep picking up things. Or if there's a DPS in your group that's just totally rocking you and you can't seem to keep aggro off from him, which I've happened a couple times, this is the great ability. pop this on them. That way when the aggro changes hands and the guy starts hitting him, he's going to take less damage. But notably, you can continuously keep taunting so that the enemy turns, hits him, and basically comes back to you. Stays on you, turns, hits him, comes back to you. Rinse and repeat for the next 12 seconds. Doesn't seem like it's that long, but trust me, it's come in handy quite a few times. The next bracket, I chose Bloodbath. I like the added bonus of just, here's an ability, you do extra damage, everything you hit is now bleeding over time, and just overall, I find that Bloodbath is great for AoE. It's got a minute cooldown, so like using it on a boss to just throw in those extra numbers, just to kind of get him down faster is nice. On some trash mobs, it's helpful to burn them down as fast as you can. The other two abilities are worth noting, and if it fits your playstyle, I don't argue taking them either. Overall, it's a fairly decent tier bracket. Not very tankish, but it's still a really good tier bracket. I'm not level 100. I haven't been able to play with the level 100 talents yet, so I couldn't tell you what they actually do. The one that I'm going to be choosing, however, is Gladiator Stance. And this is because in defensive stance, which you should be in as a tank, it's a priority that you're in that. It's going to give you an extra 5% defense all around. Never have to think about it. And it's also going to give you, when you're running around solo, it'll give you what's called Gladiator Stance, which you can use outside of the world and start doing, more damage to like mobs and stuff. Or if you tank like lower level content, you could use that, still hold aggro and be doing more damage, I would imagine. Again, I'm not level 100. I haven't been able to play with a talent. Sorry, folks. Last thing to note here, real quick. Don't know why I closed that. Last thing to note real quick is the talents that I have chosen. I have chosen Glyph of Shield Slam, which removes one magical effect. This is useful on the boss in Blood Slag Mines. He's going to constantly keep hitting you with a debuff that does fire damage over time. This will remove it. I've read forums, I've seen how people say it's not as effective, but in this expansion I've seen more diseases, more poisons, and more magical effects than any other expansion I think is out there. So I highly recommend getting this glyph. The next one is Gag Order. Whenever you pummel or Heroic Strike, or Heroic Throw, sorry, these are interrupt abilities, these two here. One's for melee up close and the other is for long distance. You can use Heroic Throw to be able to pick up adds, do damage from a distance, that sort of thing. Since Draenor actually gives you a perk, it doesn't have a cooldown anymore, so you can spam it. So like certain bosses that take to the sky that you normally wouldn't be able to hit as a melee, you could still do a little bit of damage to them. Overall, it's a pretty cool ability. Being able to silence people for 3 seconds doesn't seem like that much, but on a spellcaster, if you silence them, they come running to you. That means you're able to actually get closer to them. If you can't, you can interrupt their abilities, their spell. Overall, a number of reasons why you'd want this ability. Lastly, the next one is Glyph of Heroic Leap. Why I picked this? I couldn't find anything else. Generally, to be honest, I couldn't find anything else. I found that if you leap and have an extra speed boost, it helps get you in front of the group. helps get you out there in the open and gives you the extra hair amount of time to be able to start pulling mobs and being able to get your aggro on them before your DPS goes wild. If you have a good group, then you essentially don't have to worry about DPS pulling off from you because they're not going to be blasting random targets. They're going to be doing what you need them to do. Glyph of Intimidating Shout. That's the other damage mitigation ability that I wanted to talk about. It's not, technically doesn't classify as one, but you can interrupt all spellcasters. Again, not hard casts. You can interrupt them, and with this, instead of them running in fear and pulling the whole dungeon and just chaos, you can have them stuck in place and terrorized in fear in place. So they just quiver in the sight of you. It's like, raw, you're a warrior. You're cool. So, not only does it silence them by causing them to freak out, but it keeps them in place for just that extra hair amount of time that you might need in order to pick aggro back up. And, what else did I miss? It's not a damage mitigation ability, but Last Stand increases your current and your maximum health by 30%. There are some game mechanics that will play off this. They're few and far between, but like the more health you have, the more the better off you'll be. Like the boss I was talking about in Cataclysm. There's not really all that many situations for this, but you could get pretty creative with it. If anything, it's like an oh crap button, and then bam, you pop it. You have that little extra sliver of health if your healers get on you fast enough, or if the enemy dies fast enough, then that little bit of extra health just goes a long way. And I've seen fights where this has actually happened, more so than you would think. Somebody pops Last Stand, final second, kills the boss, has like 2% health, and the rest of the raid is dead. And it's a remarkable feeling when everyone dies, you have one cooldown, and it's like your last hope. It's an incredible feeling as a person doing it. It's nuts. So yeah, I think that pretty much concludes the guide. Obviously you're going to want to be using a shield and a sword, because you can't shield slam if you don't have a shield. It also provides extra armor, which is huge in this expansion. Yeah, I don't think there's really too much that I haven't covered that I need to cover. Alright guys, so that'll do it. Take care, peace.